Greetings, friends. I am Vitaly Portnikov. The Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, in an urgent meeting with the country's Defence Minister, Rajnath Singh, and representatives of India's top military leadership, emphasized that he is granting the Indian Army full operational freedom in determining the timing, mode, and targets of India's response to the terrorist attack in Kashmir. This, of course, refers to a strike against Pakistan. Observers in India itself are already stating that it is quite possible these words from the head of the Indian government could be the trigger for a potential military operation against the neighboring state. In Islamabad, they are reaching the same conclusions. Pakistan's Defence Minister Khawaja Asif noted that an Indian invasion of Pakistan is inevitable and urged his compatriots to be mentally prepared for the looming threat of war over Pakistan. According to Pakistan's Defence Minister, the Indian invasion of the neighboring country's territory could begin in a few days, and the Pakistani army is fully prepared to repel this aggression. Meanwhile, it is noteworthy that there are currently no effective diplomatic efforts to help cool the atmosphere in the relations between the two neighboring states, whose conflict began almost from the first years after the partition of the Indian Union and the declaration of independence by India and Pakistan. In the United States, they have generally distanced themselves from mediating the relations between New Delhi and Islamabad, likely believing that a willingness to take on such a role would only weaken the influence of the United States in the region. President Donald Trump expressed hope that India and Pakistan would resolve the new conflict on their own. Calls to cool the situation and avoid escalating to war are being made in both Beijing and Ankara. However, it is quite interesting that neither the Chinese leadership nor the Turkish leadership is offering any mediation efforts to India and Pakistan to resolve the conflict between them. Moscow, of course, remains silent as well. And here, it may give the impression that a war between India and Pakistan could be beneficial to all parties that should have been interested in reconciliation between India and Pakistan. The People's Republic of China might be counting on India, overestimating its strength, that the war will not be short-term, that it will drag on and could spill over, again with Chinese support, onto Indian territory, thereby destroying the country's reputation as a safe haven for Western business. In a situation where many American businessmen are not only considering relocating their enterprises from the People's Republic of China to India, but have already begun to implement these plans, demonstrating to Americans the full risk of their presence in a country that could at any moment find itself in a geopolitical conflict with another nuclear state, is quite in line with China's foreign policy plans. Russia may also be interested in a large-scale conflict between India and Pakistan, hoping that prolonged fighting between the two neighboring countries and the death of thousands of people who will inevitably become victims of this conflict, as well as the natural humanitarian crisis in both warring countries, will divert the West's attention from the Russian-Ukrainian war and allow Russia to be less concerned about President Donald Trump of the United States withdrawing from the negotiation process to resolve the Russian-Ukrainian war, if only because the Russian-Ukrainian war itself, against the backdrop of a large-scale war between two nuclear powers, will clearly not interest Washington to the extent that it interests Donald Trump today. And the American president may prefer a sluggish negotiation process against the backdrop of ongoing military actions to his withdrawal from foreign policy mediation in this matter. Finally, Turkey can quite reasonably expect that with the help of Pakistan, and if it naturally provides effective support to this country being attacked by India, it will strengthen its role as a leader of the Muslim world. And in this same situation, we can consider the interest of Iran, which will, of course, side with India trying to inflict as much damage as possible on its Sunni rivals and opponents. That is, by and large, in the international community, we see not so much an interest in achieving a peace agreement between India and Pakistan, but rather an interest in a large-scale war. And those who should have been supporters of reconciliation and dialogue may quite consciously be pushing Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi towards this war. Modi himself also needs to appear as a strong leader who responds to the terrorist threat, especially against the backdrop of growing anti-Pakistan sentiments within India itself, which are further fueled by the country's government. In this situation, both Modi and his ministers become hostages of their ultra-patriotic propaganda and may find themselves in a position where, even if they try to stop the momentum of ongoing war preparations, they will be powerless. A completely straightforward story that we know from lessons, for example, from the First World War. Most of the leaders whose countries later participated in this conflict and then disappeared from the political map of the world clearly did not want a major war, but used the ultra-patriotic sentiments of the population to strengthen their regimes and make their compatriots forget about the mistakes and economic difficulties that the countries were experiencing soon after beginning to fight among themselves in one of the bloodiest wars of the 20th century. And the Indian-Pakistani conflict always seems to illustrate precisely this kind of logic. Initially, ultra-patriotic sentiments are inflamed, which demand immediate and serious action. And then, when politicians believe they have already achieved their desired goals and have swayed public opinion in their favor, they can no longer stop the very mechanism of war preparation and are forced to initiate military actions that were supposed to be short-term but turn into a months-long or even years-long war, with the loss of thousands of lives. Currently, the only hope that such a situation will not fully occur and spiral out of control is Pakistan's apprehension and the apparent reluctance of its government to engage in a new major war with India, which was clearly preparing for this conflict and merely waiting for an excuse to make claims against Pakistan regarding the continued activities of terrorist and nationalist groups in the Indian-controlled part of Kashmir. And perhaps not mediation, but rather Pakistani caution might prevent the region from sliding into a military catastrophe. Thank you, friends. Stay on this channel, subscribe to it, subscribe to Patreon, Donatel, and Buy Me a Coffee, which help develop this product and use the sponsorship feature on YouTube itself. Peace to you.